It began with a single gunshot on a warm summer night in 1976. Claude Snelling, a devoted father, was tragically killed outside his Visalia home while fighting to save his teenage daughter from a masked intruder. What seemed like a tragic but isolated crime was, in reality, the opening act of a reign of terror that would grip California for over a decade. A faceless predator lurked in the darkness, watching, waiting, and striking with chilling precision. More than 50 violent attacks. At least 13 tragic killings. Entire communities lived in fear as he vanished without a trace after each attack, always one step ahead of law enforcement. How did he remain invisible for so long? And what finally led to his unmasking? This is the story of one of the most elusive criminals in history, and the relentless hunt to bring him down. The terror was undeniable, but beneath the fear lay a web of unanswered questions. Who was this faceless predator, hiding in plain sight? A faceless predator. Silent streets turned into hunting grounds. This is Derrick Investigates, and I'm Derrick. Tonight we uncover the terrifying reign of a killer who turned California's suburbs into his personal hunting ground, watching, waiting, and striking with chilling precision. For years, a shadow crept through the night, slipping past locked doors and into the lives of unsuspecting victims. He was meticulous, unrelenting, and always one step ahead. His crimes shattered families, paralyzed entire communities, and left investigators grasping at fragments of a nightmare. Who was this shadowy figure? How did he evade capture for so long? And even now, could we be missing a crucial piece of the puzzle? Stay with us as we dissect the evidence, expose the missteps, and reveal the breakthroughs that finally unmasked one of the most elusive criminals in history. If the unknown intrigues you as much as it does me, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Together, we shine a light on the darkest corners of history and continue the relentless search for answers. To uncover the origins of this horror, we must go back to where it all began, the 1970s, in the quiet suburbs of California. Visalia, California, 1976, a town where life moved at a comfortable rhythm. Nestled in the San Joaquin Valley, it was the kind of place where doors were left unlocked, children rode their bikes until dusk, and families felt safe in their own homes. Among its residents was 23-year-old Claude Snelling, a beloved journalism professor at the College of the Sequoias. Respected by his students and cherished by his family, Claude was more than an educator. He was a storyteller, a mentor, and above all, a devoted father. His teenage daughter Beth was the center of his world, a young girl filled with ambition and curiosity, ready to embrace the future under her father's watchful guidance. Their home on Whitney Lane was a place of warmth and simplicity, where family dinners were filled with laughter and late-night conversations stretched into the early hours. Life was ordinary. Life was good. But in the early hours of September 11th, 1976, everything changed. A shadow moved in the darkness. The stillness of the night was shattered by the sound of a struggle. Beth's muffled screams, the thud of hurried footsteps, and then a single gunshot. Claude Snelling, in one final act of courage, fought to protect his daughter from an intruder who had slipped into their home under the cover of night. By sunrise, the illusion of safety was gone. Visalia, a town unaccustomed to violence, was left reeling. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones, locking their doors for the first time. Fear seeped into the fabric of the community, a cold and unfamiliar presence that would linger long after that fateful night. And as the town mourned a hero, no one could have known that this was only the beginning. A silent predator had made his first move, and he was far from finished. It was just past 2 a.m. on September 11th, 1976, when Beth Snelling was startled awake by the sound of her bedroom window being pried open. In the darkness, a masked intruder loomed, his figure illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlights outside. He moved with unsettling precision, his voice cold and commanding as he grabbed Beth and dragged her toward the back door. The commotion awoke Claude Snelling, who instinctively rushed to his daughter's aid. Bursting through the door, Claude confronted the intruder with a mix of fear and fury, determined to save Beth at any cost. In the struggle that ensued, the masked man raised a gun and fired, striking Claude in the chest. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the night, followed by the panicked retreat of the assailant, who disappeared into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. Claude collapsed on the ground, his life slipping away as Beth screamed for help. Neighbors, startled by the noise, rushed to the scene to find a grieving daughter cradling her father's lifeless body. The serene streets of Whitney Lane were now stained with blood and fear. The crime scene revealed unsettling clues that hinted at a deeper mystery. Investigators found evidence suggesting that the intruder had been stalking the Snelling family for weeks, watching their every move from the cover of darkness. The discarded window screen and faint footprints in the dirt told a story of premeditation, while the absence of significant evidence left more questions than answers. What kind of person would commit such a heinous act? Why target the Snelling family? And perhaps most chilling of all, was this an isolated incident or the beginning of something far more sinister? In the weeks following the attack, whispers of unease spread through Visalia. The town, once known for its tranquility, now harbored a sense of foreboding. Residents began locking their doors at night and looking over their shoulders, afraid that the shadowy figure might strike again. As investigators delved deeper into the case, more unsettling details emerged. Reports surfaced of a prowler in the neighborhood, a man seen peering into windows and lurking in backyards. Dubbed the Visalia Ransacker by local authorities, this elusive figure was linked to a string of burglaries and break-ins that bore striking similarities to the Snelling case. Yet despite these connections, the identity of the intruder remained a mystery. He moved like a ghost, leaving behind only fragments of his presence, an open drawer, a ransacked room, a shattered sense of security. The community's questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered and unnerving. Little did anyone know that this crime was merely the first chapter in a chilling saga that would span years and devastate countless lives. The predator who had taken Claude Snelling's life would go on to terrorize communities across California, leaving an indelible mark on the state's history. And though the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to emerge, it would take decades of painstaking investigation to finally bring the shadowy figure into the light. The Visalia Police Department quickly mobilized to investigate the shocking murder of Claude Snelling. For a town unaccustomed to such violence, the crime was both horrifying and bewildering. Investigators began their work with what little evidence they had: a set of partial footprints near the Snelling residence, a disturbed window screen, and the chilling accounts of Beth Snelling. Beth's recollection provided critical clues. She described the intruder as a masked man with a commanding demeanor, his voice cold and detached. He seemed to know the layout of their home, moving with purpose rather than hesitation. It was a chilling detail. This was no random act. The man had planned his actions meticulously, and the Snelling family was his target. This wasn't impulse. He had studied his target, mapped his escape, and anticipated obstacles. That level of preparation points to compulsion, not opportunity. As investigators pieced together the events of that night, an unsettling realization emerged. Reports of a prowler matching Beth's description had circulated in the months leading up to the crime. Dubbed the Visalia Ransacker, this individual had terrorized the community with a string of break-ins and bizarre behavior. He left behind a trail of ransacked homes, stolen trinkets, and shattered nerves. Could this masked intruder be the same man who had been stalking the quiet streets of Visalia for months? But the case was far from straightforward. Early theories ranged from a personal vendetta against Claude Snelling to a random act of violence by an unhinged criminal. The lack of clear motive added to the air of mystery surrounding the crime. Investigators were determined to unravel the truth, but the road ahead was fraught with challenges. Key details began to surface. Details that hinted at a deeper, more sinister story. Witnesses reported seeing a suspicious figure lurking near the Snelling home on multiple occasions before the attack. The prowler's methodical movements suggested a calculated mind, someone who thrived on instilling fear. Yet every lead seemed to end in frustration. Serial offenders follow a pattern. Burglary isn't always the endgame, it's a rehearsal. If the ransacker and Snelling's killer were the same, that night wasn't an anomaly. It was escalation. Tension in the community mounted as the investigation dragged on. The police combed through potential suspects, tirelessly following up on tips from concerned residents. But with each dead end, the mystery only deepened. The Snelling family's grief weighed heavily on investigators, who felt the pressure to bring justice to the man who had been described as a local hero. Authorities meticulously pieced together the details of Claude Snelling's final moments, hoping to connect the dots to the elusive figure responsible. Forensic teams analyzed the footprints found near the scene, but the evidence yielded little more than a general shoe size. Investigators also gathered reports from neighbors, many of whom mentioned unusual activity around their homes. As the investigation deepened, a clearer pattern emerged. The Visalia ransacker had been linked to over 100 burglaries in the area. His methods were bizarre, breaking into homes, stealing small, insignificant items, and often leaving behind personal effects. Sometimes he rearranged furniture or rifled through drawers, as if taunting his victims with his presence. Detectives theorized that the ransacker had been stalking the Snelling family for weeks, perhaps months. Claude's protective instincts may have made him an obstacle in the intruder's twisted plans, leading to the tragic confrontation that cost him his life. The growing fear in Visalia was palpable. This was no ordinary criminal. He was calculated, cruel, and unrelenting. Despite their efforts, the police faced mounting frustration. The ransacker seemed to vanish into thin air after each crime, leaving behind no fingerprints or identifiable evidence. Patrols were increased and residents were urged to remain vigilant. Yet the predator continued to strike, each time with greater audacity. Was he testing fear itself, pushing limits before escalating to violence? His crimes weren't just theft, they were psychological invasions meant to unsettle, to linger. Then came a breakthrough, a harrowing moment that would define the investigation. In December 1976, an undercover officer staking out a neighborhood near another prowler's suspected target nearly apprehended the ransacker. A dramatic chase ensued, but the suspect slipped away into the darkness, leaving behind a stolen gun and yet another chilling reminder of his presence. The Visalia ransacker's reign of terror came to an abrupt end shortly after this incident, but not because he was caught. Instead, the crimes stopped as suddenly as they had begun. Investigators were left with an unresolved case and haunting questions about the identity of the man who had brought so much pain to their community. Theories abounded. Was he arrested for an unrelated crime? Did he flee the area? Or was he lying low, biding his time? For decades, the mystery remained unsolved, a shadow cast over the legacy of Claude Snelling's bravery. Could this have been the precursor to a larger, more sinister spree of crimes? Or was Visalia's nightmare finally over? The answer would come years later, but by then the scope of the ransacker's crimes would prove to be far greater and far darker than anyone could have imagined. Years passed, and the name Visalia ransacker became a chilling footnote in the town's history. However, in 2018, a shocking breakthrough would connect this shadowy figure to a far more sinister story. Using cutting-edge DNA technology, investigators working on an unrelated case, the Golden State Killer, stumbled upon a genetic link that led them to Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer living in California. The arrest sent shockwaves across the nation. As authorities delved into DeAngelo's past, details emerged that painted a disturbing picture. Among the revelations were eerie similarities between the Golden State Killer's methods and those of the Visalia ransacker. Both prowled neighborhoods late at night, meticulously planned their crimes, and seemed to enjoy taunting their victims and the authorities. But what truly connected the dots? A series of chilling revelations surfaced during the investigation. First, old police records showed that DeAngelo had been stationed as a police officer in Exeter, just minutes from Visalia, during the exact period of the ransacker's reign of terror. His sudden departure from Exeter in 1976 coincided almost perfectly with the end of the ransacker's activities. Next came the physical evidence. In a haunting twist, items stolen from Visalia homes decades earlier were discovered among DeAngelo's personal belongings. These keepsakes, small, seemingly insignificant trinkets, were a hallmark of the ransacker's crimes. investigators found that the unique pattern of stolen items matched those taken during the Visalia burglaries, further tying DeAngelo to the ransacker's spree. Perhaps most chilling was the re-examination of witness accounts. A composite sketch created after the botched kidnapping and murder of Claude Snelling bore an uncanny resemblance to DeAngelo in his younger years. Side-by-side comparisons of the sketch and photographs from DeAngelo's time as a police officer left little room for doubt. The pattern is unmistakable. Early break-ins were intrusive but restrained, almost like rehearsals. Over time, the need for control grew, the violence escalated. This wasn't random, it was refinement, but it was the behavior that sealed the connection. DeAngelo's meticulous planning, his obsession with control, and the psychological games he played with victims were traits that spanned his crimes as both the ransacker and the Golden State Killer. It was as if the ransacker crimes had been a precursor, a training ground for the horrors that would follow. This series of revelations painted a grim picture of a man who had lived a double life, hiding behind the badge of law enforcement while terrorizing communities. For the people of Visalia, the revelation was both horrifying and strangely validating. The elusive ransacker had finally been unmasked. However, despite the mountain of circumstantial and behavioral evidence, DeAngelo never confessed to being the Visalia ransacker. This lack of an outright admission left some lingering uncertainty, a shadow of mystery that refused to dissipate entirely. Silence can be as revealing as a confession. When offenders refuse to admit to crimes already linked to them, it's often less about denial and more about control. For someone like DeAngelo, the power wasn't just in the crimes, it was in the unanswered questions that followed. The unmasking of Joseph James DeAngelo as the Golden State Killer was a shocking conclusion to decades of fear and speculation. But for Visalia, it was also a sobering reminder of the horrors that had once haunted their quiet town. The role of law enforcement in uncovering the truth about Joseph DeAngelo was pivotal. Local agencies had long suspected that the Visalia ransacker and the Golden State Killer might be connected, but the lack of concrete evidence left their theories unproven for years. It was only through the determined efforts of cold case detectives and the application of genetic genealogy that the pieces of the puzzle finally came together. By tracing familial DNA from a public database, investigators narrowed their focus to DeAngelo, eventually collecting his DNA from discarded items to confirm the match. This groundbreaking method not only solved countless cases, but also highlighted the challenges faced by earlier investigators. Limited by the tools of their time, they had pursued every lead, combed through evidence, and even risked their lives during stakeouts to stop the ransacker. Despite their dedication, the technology needed to catch him simply didn't exist in the 1970s. The cooperation between local and federal agencies underscored the importance of collaboration in solving cold cases. The FBI's involvement, alongside state and local agencies, brought renewed attention to the ransacker's crimes and ensured that no stone was left unturned. For many, the eventual capture of Joseph DeAngelo symbolized the triumph of perseverance over time. But for others, it was a sobering reminder of the years he spent eluding justice, living a double life as a trusted officer and a calculated predator. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the chilling case of the Golden State Killer. For decades, he was a ghost in the night, his crimes a puzzle with missing pieces. But justice, no matter how long it takes, has a way of catching up. The arrest of Joseph DeAngelo proved that persistence and technology can unmask even the most elusive predators. Yet unsettling questions remain. How many more like him are still out there? How many cases are just one breakthrough away from being solved? At Derrick Investigates, we go beyond the headlines to uncover the truths buried beneath them. The search for answers never truly ends. What do you think? Will forensic science continue bringing long-lost justice to light? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this investigation compelling, like, share, and subscribe for more cases that defy easy answers. That's it for this episode. But the search for truth never stops. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep questioning everything. I'm Derrick, and I'll be back soon. with another investigation.